The air in the apex conclave was a carefully managed cocktail of tolerable atmospheres, a testament to the fragile peace it was meant to preserve. Polished obsidian floors reflected the soft, ambient glow of the station's central singularity, a captured starlet whose light was filtered and diffused into 100 different spectra to accommodate 100 different kinds of eyes. Here, in the heart of neutral territory, the great predatory empires of the Orion Arm met to settle disputes with words instead of claws and hypervelocity rounds. The very concept was a strain on the biology of every delegate present. From his elevated dais, High-Claw Xyler of the Cathar Imperium surveyed the assembly. His own people, a species of powerful, felinoid hunters, valued the elegant efficiency of a killing pounce. Diplomacy was a tedious, unnatural affair, a dance of veiled threats and snarled pleasantries. His tawny fur, marked with the ritual scars of his clan's 7 sacred hunts, bristled with impatience. His gaze swept over the others. There was Nexus Prime 7 of the Vex, a glistening black chitinous horror whose species was less a collection of individuals and more a single, terrifyingly logical mind distributed across trillions of bodies. Its multifaceted eyes, unblinking and vast, absorbed every detail with cold calculation. Opposite them sat Elder Fathom Speaker Thuum of the Glorn Hegemony, a massive, amphibious being whose mottled green and brown hide suggested ancient river stones. He remained motionless in his humidified alcove, only the slow, rhythmic pulse of his gular sac betraying that he was alive at all. The Glorn were ambush predators, their patience measured in geological time. And then there were the humans. Xyler's lip curled, revealing the tip of a canine that could sever spinal columns. The human representative, Ambassador Evelyn Reed, sat with a posture that was neither deferential nor aggressive. It was an unnerving stillness, a calm that felt utterly alien in a room built on the premise of contained violence. She was a small, soft thing, all pale skin and fragile bones. Her species was a newcomer, an anomaly. They were predators, yes. Their history was drenched in blood, their expansionist drive undeniable, but they were wrong. They lacked the obvious physical weaponry. No claws, no fangs of consequence, no venom sacs or armored hides. Their predation was outsourced to their tools, a fact that many in the conclave found distasteful, a form of cheating. The current dispute was trivial, a disagreement over mining rights in the Cygnus Vale, a nebula rich in exotic matter. The Cathar had claimed it by right of conquest, having driven out a lesser scavenger species. The humans had arrived later, establishing an outpost and arguing for shared access based on principles of galactic commons, a concept Xyler found both absurd and insulting. The law of the hunt is clear. Xyler's voice was a low growl, amplified by the translators into a universally understood bass rumble. The territory belongs to the predator strong enough to hold it. We culled the Jack-Jack parasites from the Vale. Their weakness forfeited their claim. We took the territory. It is ours. This is the natural order. He gestured with a clawed hand, a gesture of finality. Nexus Prime 7's translator rendered its chittering clicks into a synthesized, genderless monotone. Logic dictates that resource optimization is the primary goal. The Cathar claim is based on an antiquated principle of dominance. Human presence increases resource extraction efficiency by a factor of 3.14. Sharing the territory is the most logical course of action for maximum yield. Logic, Xyler scoffed. Your hive thinks of the galaxy as a carcass to be stripped. We see it as a hunting ground, a place to prove our strength, to live as our nature dictates. There is honor in the Cathar way. There is only consumption in yours. It was then that Ambassador Reed spoke, her voice calm and measured, yet it cut through the tension like a finely honed blade. The United Terran Mandate acknowledges the Cathar's prowess. We don't dispute your strength, but the Jack-Jack, they were not combatants. They were a nascent spacefaring species. Our scans showed they had no effective weaponry. Xyler turned his golden, slitted eyes upon her. They were prey. They were in a resource-rich environment. Their existence was an inefficiency. The strong consume the weak. It is the great and beautiful truth of the universe. Surely even a tool user like yourself understands this simple fact. We understand it, Evelyn said, her hands clasped on the table before her. But we don't always agree with it. A ripple of confusion went through the chamber. Even the ever-still Thewum seemed to shift, his massive head tilting a fraction of a degree. Disagreement with the fundamental law of existence. What did that even mean? It was like disagreeing with gravity. Explain, Xyler demanded, leaning forward, his muscles coiled under his fur. There was no honor in that kill, Highclaw, Evelyn said, her gaze steady. You speak of the sacred hunt. We understand that, the contest between predator and prey, but what you did to the Jack-Jack was not a hunt. It was a slaughter. There was no struggle, no test of skill. Xyler let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. The struggle is in finding and taking the territory. The prey's weakness is their failing, not ours. It is the way. The hunger demands we take what we need. The instinct to expand, to control resources for the next generation, demands we clear what is in our way. Our biology is our mandate. You kill to survive. We kill to survive. We are the same in this. Evelyn's expression shifted. It was a subtle change, a sadness that settled in her eyes. It was the look of someone about to cross a threshold from which there was no return. She had hoped to avoid this. For 2 decades, humanity had carefully curated its image, presenting itself as just another predator, a bit eccentric, a bit tool-reliant, but fundamentally understandable. They had hidden the truth, knowing, perhaps, that it was too terrible for this audience to comprehend. "No, Highclaw," she said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate and infinitely more chilling. "We are not the same." Nexus Prime's head swiveled with a series of sharp clicks, its optical sensors focusing intently on the human. "Elaborate on the differentiation. Your species requires protein, minerals, and caloric intake for biological function. You compete for territory. You eliminate threats. The foundational drivers are identical." "The drivers are not the same," Evelyn stated. "You, Highclaw Xyler, when your body feels the deep pang of the hunger, your instincts sharpen. Your senses attune to the hunt. The drive to kill, to feed, to provide for your clan, it rises in you like a tide. It is a biological imperative, is it not? You can no more ignore it than you can choose to stop your hearts from beating." Xyler bristled, but he could not deny it. The hunger was a holy fire, a force of nature that moved through him. It is the source of our strength, our purpose. "And you, Nexus Prime 7, Evelyn continued, turning to the insectoid. "The hive identifies a threat or a resource. An equation is formed, the cost of acquisition versus the value of the asset. The decision to eliminate a competitor is a calculation, a function of the hive's singular will to survive and expand. There is no individual malice. It is as impersonal and inexorable as a chemical reaction." "That is a correct, if simplified, assessment," the machine voice droned. "An elder Fathom speaker Thewum," she said, her voice softening with respect for the ancient being. "Your people wait. You feel the rhythms of the ecosystem. When the time is right, when the prey is plentiful or careless, you strike. It is the culmination of a long, patient cycle, a part of the great balance. You do not kill wantonly. You kill when the universe presents the opportunity your biology was designed to seize." Thewum's great eye, a universe of cloudy nebulae and dark matter, blinked once slowly. The gesture was his assent. Evelyn paused, letting the silence settle. She took a slow breath, the sound impossibly loud in the charged atmosphere. "We are not like that. We have those echoes, of course, the remnants of our own predatory origins. But they are just that, echoes, whispers in a vast, silent chamber." She leaned forward, her gaze sweeping over them all, 3 apex predators from 3 terrifying empires. When a Cathar kills, it is because the hunger drives you. When the Vex kills, it is because the hive's logic demands it. When a Glorn kills, it is because the cycle requires it. She paused again. The final, terrible truth hung in the air, waiting to be spoken. "When a human kills," she said, her voice now barely a whisper but carrying to every corner of the room, "it is because we choose to." The silence that followed was not empty. It was a physical presence, a crushing weight of sudden, profound comprehension. Xyler stared, his golden eyes wide. The concept was so alien, so fundamentally wrong, that his mind struggled to even form a response. Killing was not a choice. It was a function. It was like breathing. You did not choose to inhale. Choose. Xyler finally managed to rasp the word foreign on his tongue. "What do you mean, choose?" "I mean," Evelyn said, her voice regaining its strength, that hunger does not compel us to hunt. We can be starving, and we can still choose to share our last meal. Logic does not compel us to eliminate a rival. We can know with absolute certainty that an enemy will be a threat, and still choose to offer them mercy. The cycles of the universe do not dictate our actions. We can see an opportunity to strike with impunity, and we can choose to walk away. She stood up, her small form commanding the attention of the entire chamber. We have no biological imperative to kill. None. Every time a human has taken a life in our entire history, from the first rock thrown in anger to the orbital bombardments that glassed our own worlds, it was a decision, a conscious, deliberate act of will. And every time we have shown mercy, every time we have built or healed or protected, that too was a choice. Nexus Prime 7's mandibles began to click, a staccato rhythm of pure cognitive dissonance, a variable without a constant, an action without a biological or logical antecedent. Chaos. Sheer, unpredictable chaos. Elder Thewum's gular sac deflated with a soft, wet hiss. He had lived for 1,000 standard years. He had seen suns born and die. He had communed with the deep patterns of the cosmos. But in all that time, he had never conceived of such a thing. A predator that was not a slave to the kill. A being for whom violence was not a necessity, but an option. Xyler felt a tremor of true, primal fear, a feeling he had not experienced since he was a cub. It was not the fear of a stronger opponent. It was the existential horror of facing something that broke the fundamental laws of reality as he knew it. He had always looked at humans with a measure of contempt for their softness, their reliance on machines. Now he saw that he had been catastrophically wrong. Their weakness was not in their bodies. Their terror was in their minds. He looked at Evelyn Reed, at her soft hands and her expressive face, and for the first time he saw her as she truly was. Not as a rival diplomat. Not as a representative of a tool-using species. He saw a monster far more terrifying than any Cathar berserker or Vex swarm. He was looking at a creature that could hold the power of life and death in its hands and ask itself a question that no other predator in that room had ever had to consider. Should I? The silence in the conclave stretched into an eternity. The trivial matter of the Cygnus veil was forgotten, incinerated in the blaze of this new, terrifying revelation. The delegates were no longer diplomats discussing territory. They were predator and something else, something unaccountable. Xyler was the first to find his voice again, though it came out as a strangled growl. You lie. It is a trick, a pathetic attempt to seem, what, more evolved. You are flesh and blood. You consume, you reproduce. You are bound by the same chains as the rest of us. Are we? Evelyn's question was soft, but it landed like a physical blow. Highclaw, has your species ever produced a work of art that mourns the prey you have slain? Have you ever written a symphony that celebrates not the thrill of the hunt, but the quiet beauty of a creature you deliberately chose not to kill? Have you ever built a hospital dedicated to healing the very rivals you defeated in battle? The questions were nonsensical to him. Mourn the prey? That was to dishonor the hunger, to insult the spirit of the fallen that now gave him strength. Heal a rival? That was to invite a claw to your throat the moment you turned your back. These were not signs of evolution. They were symptoms of a profound sickness, a deep-seated madness that ran to the very core of their species. These are perversions, Xyler snarled, his fur standing on end. You speak of weakness, of a broken instinct. No, Evelyn countered, her voice ringing with a conviction that unsettled him even more. We speak of freedom, the freedom to be more than what our biology dictates, the freedom to define our own honor, our own purpose. Nexus Prime 7's translator cut in, its tone flat but laced with an undeniable undercurrent of alarm. The variable of choice, as you describe it, makes your species strategically incomprehensible. Our predictive models are based on species acting in accordance with their biological and environmental imperatives. A species that can act contrary to its own survival instinct, contrary to optimal resource acquisition, contrary to logical threat assessment. You are not merely an unpredictable opponent. You are a chaotic agent. You cannot be modeled, you cannot be reliably predicted. The implication was clear. To the Vex, that which could not be predicted was the ultimate threat. A supernova could be predicted. The trajectory of a rival fleet could be predicted, but a species that could, on a whim, choose peace when war was logical, or choose war when peace was advantageous. That was a cancer in the tidy, ordered universe of the hive mind. It was Elder Fathom Speaker Thewum who finally broke the escalating tension. His voice, when it came, was like the grinding of continents, slow, deep, and resonant with immeasurable age. It filled the chamber not with aggression but with a profound, soul-shaking gravity. "Ambassador Reed," the ancient Glorn began, his great eye fixed upon her. "For 10 of your lifetimes I have observed the currents of the void. I have seen the dance of instinct play out across 1,000 worlds. The hunter strikes, the prey flees, the scavenger cleanses. It is the great unwritten song of existence, a song we are all born knowing how to sing." He paused, the rhythmic pulsing of his throat a soft counterpoint to his words. "You claim your people are not born to this song. You claim you must learn it, and that you can also choose to learn a different song entirely, a song of not hunting." "Yes, Elder," Evelyn affirmed, inclining her head respectfully. "This freedom you speak of," Thewum continued, his voice heavy with contemplation. "This choice, it must be a terrible burden, to carry the weight of the kill not as an instinct but as a judgment. Does it not fracture you?" The question was so perceptive, so deeply insightful, that Evelyn felt a genuine pang of shock. In all their first contact scenarios, no one had ever asked that. They had only ever asked about their technology or their military strength. No one had ever asked about their souls. "Yes," she admitted, her voice thick with the weight of millennia of human history. "It does. It has fractured us many times. Our history is a litany of those fractures. We are capable of a cruelty that would be incomprehensible to an instinct-bound predator. We can kill for reasons you would not understand, for an idea, for a belief, for a piece of colored cloth, or for nothing at all." Xyler flinched as if struck. Killing for an idea. The concept was obscene. You killed for food, for territory, for the survival of your bloodline. These were pure, clean motives sanctioned by the universe itself. Killing for a mere thought in one's head. It was the action of a demon. "But this same fracture," Evelyn went on, her gaze unwavering, "this same terrible freedom is also the source of everything we value. It allows us to create art, to seek knowledge for its own sake, to feel empathy for species completely unlike ourselves. It allows us to love, not just as a procreative instinct, but as a willed act of self-sacrifice. It allows us to strive every day to be better than we were the day before. The burden is immense, Elder, but the potential, it is infinite." The session was formally suspended. There was no vote, no conclusion to the debate on the Cygnus Veil. It had been rendered utterly irrelevant. The delegates retreated to their private chambers, the revelations of the day churning within them. Xyler paced his quarters, the plush carpets unable to soothe the frantic energy coursing through him. The room was decorated to emulate a Cathar hunting lodge, with holographic vistas of windswept savannas and the scent of wild game faintly perfuming the air. Usually, it calmed him. Today, it felt like a mockery. The sacred hunt, the purity of the kill, the clean, honest exchange of life for life. He had built his entire identity, his culture's entire philosophy on these pillars, and the human had shattered them with a single word: choice. He tried to imagine it, standing over a fat, slow-moving herbivore, his belly aching with the hunger, his claws unsheathed, and just walking away. The thought was physically repulsive. It was a denial of his very essence, a betrayal of the ancestors who had honed their bodies into perfect killing machines. But the human's words echoed, cruelty incomprehensible to an instinct-bound predator. He thought of the Cathar's own history. They fought brutal wars for territory. They culled the weak from their own prides. But it was always for a reason he could understand: survival, strength, dominance. He could not conceive of harming another being for the sheer pleasure of it, or to prove a philosophical point. Was that what humans did? A shiver, not of cold but of deep-seated dread, ran through him. He had always seen the Cathar as the apex. Strong, noble, decisive. Now he wondered, was his strength, his decisiveness, anything more than a complex biological program? Was his honor simply the elegant execution of an instinct he had no power to defy? He, Highclaw Xyler, who had hunted the great crystal beasts of Viridia, and faced down a matriarch of the spire crawlers, felt a terrifying new sensation. He felt like a puppet. A gloriously crafted, powerful puppet, but a puppet nonetheless, his strings pulled by the unthinking demands of his DNA. And the humans, they had no strings. They could dance any dance they wished. Or they could set the stage on fire. The unpredictability was maddening. How could you form a treaty with a creature whose promises were not bound by instinct? A Cathar's oath was its nature. A human's oath was a choice that could be unchosen tomorrow. He felt a surge of violent rage, not at the humans, but at the universe itself for creating such a loophole, such a monstrous aberration. Meanwhile, in the sterile, humming chamber of the Vex, Nexus Prime 7 was interfacing directly with the hive mind. Trillions of minds, separated by light years, were processing a single crippling paradox. Query: a chaotic agent capable of altruism, self-destruction, and random acts of both violence and creation. All inputs are equally probable. Analysis: the human species represents a fundamental break in the causal chain of evolutionary development. All known life forms operate on a spectrum of instinct, from simple chemical responses to complex social behaviors. The human claim of choice suggests a meta-level of consciousness operating outside this spectrum. Conclusion: the species is an existential threat, not a military threat. Their fleet is negligible compared to the swarm. Not a resource threat, their consumption is inefficient. They are a conceptual threat. Their existence invalidates the core principles of Vex logic. To the Vex, the universe was a grand, intricate equation. Life was a variable, but it was a predictable one. You could chart its course, understand its motives, and plan accordingly. The humans had just introduced an imaginary number into the heart of that equation. Everything was now suspect. Every model, every prediction was tainted by the possibility of a species that did not have to follow the rules. Directive: reevaluate all interaction protocols with the human species. Isolate. Observe. Do not engage until the variable of choice can be quantified. If it cannot be quantified, it must be simplified. The hive mind solution was cold and logical. If you cannot solve for X, you remove X from the equation. The process would be regrettable, an inefficient use of biomass. But the integrity of the universal equation had to be maintained. In his humid grotto, Elder Fathom Speaker Thuum floated weightlessly in the nutrient-rich water. His thoughts were not frantic like Xyler's or clinical like the Vex S. They were slow, deep currents, moving with the patience of a glacier. A terrible burden, he had called it. He now believed that was the truest thing ever spoken in the conclave. The Glorn philosophy was one of acceptance. They accepted their nature as predators. They accepted the long waits, the sudden violence, the cycle of life and death. They were a part of the universe, a gear in the great machine. They did not struggle against their nature, they perfected it. To be the best possible version of a Glorn was the ultimate goal. The humans, it seemed, had no single version of themselves to perfect. They were a maelstrom of possibilities. A human could be a killer or a healer, a creator or a destroyer. And the most terrifying part was that the same human could be all of those things in the space of a single lifetime, or even a single day. Thuum felt a sensation that was utterly foreign to his placid nature. It was a flicker of envy. What would it be like? To see a school of silver-finned fry swarm past your waiting maw, to feel the deep, instinctual command to open your jaws and feast, and to simply watch them go, not out of satiation, but out of a simple, willed decision. To appreciate their beauty, separate from their function as food. It was a beautiful thought, and it was immediately followed by a horrifying one. What would it be like to feel the urge to protect your spawning grounds, and to choose to let a rival destroy it? To feel the drive to nurture your young and to choose to abandon them? If the choice to be good existed, then the choice to be evil, for no reason other than the choice itself, must also exist. He finally understood. The other predators feared humanity's capacity for violence. But the true terror of humanity was not their weapons or their ambition. It was their moral autonomy. They were the only truly free species in the galaxy. And freedom, Thuum now realized, was the most dangerous force in the universe. It was the freedom to create gods and devils in your own image. Evelyn Reed sat in her own quarters, the standard, sterile room assigned to all delegates. She stared at her reflection in the darkened viewport, the starfield of the apex conclave swirling behind her image. She looked tired. The weight of her species, of their contradictory, beautiful, monstrous nature, felt heavier than ever. She had done what the mandate had sent her to do. For years, they had debated this. The Revelation Protocol. Some argued for keeping their nature a secret forever, to always pretend they were just another hungry predator. It was safer, they said, it made them understandable, but Evelyn had championed the protocol. You cannot build a true peace on a lie, she had argued. They will learn the truth eventually. Better it comes from us. Better we frame it not as a monstrosity, but as the foundation of our ethics. Now, she wasn't so sure. She had seen the pure, undiluted horror in Zyler's eyes. She had heard the cold, calculating threat in the Vex's voice. She had sensed the deep, philosophical disturbance in Thuum's ancient soul. She had meant to offer a bridge of understanding, and had instead created a chasm of existential dread. Her private calm chimed. It was a secured channel from Elder Thuum. She accepted it, surprised. A hologram of the Glorn's massive head shimmered into existence before her. "Ambassador Reed," the deep voice rumbled. "Your words have unmoored me." "That was not my intention, Elder," Evelyn said sincerely. "Perhaps not," Thuum replied. "But it was the necessary outcome of the truth. I have been meditating on your revelation. My kind has a concept we call the silent flow. It is the acceptance of one's nature, the path of least resistance against the currents of instinct. We believe wisdom lies in mastering the flow, not in fighting it." "And humanity?" Evelyn prompted. "Humanity, you are not in the flow. You are the flow. You are the current itself, capable of changing direction at will. This is a power akin to that which births stars and collapses galaxies. You are a force of cosmic creation and therefore also of cosmic destruction." "We try to be the former," Evelyn said softly. "Trying implies the possibility of failure," Thuum noted, not unkindly. "The other empires, they will not see this duality as you do. The Cathar will see only the monster. The Vex will see only the chaos. They will decide that a force so unpredictable must be caged. Or extinguished." Evelyn's heart grew cold. "Is that what you believe, Elder?" Thuum was silent for a long time. The pulsing of his gular sac was the only sound. "I believe," he said at last, "that the most dangerous predator is not the one who is hungry. It is the one who is not, and kills anyway. But I also believe that the most trustworthy ally is not the one whose nature aligns with your own. It is the one who chooses to stand with you, despite their nature. You have shown us a universe more complex and more terrifying than we ever imagined, and now we must all choose how to live in it." The hologram faded, leaving Evelyn alone with her reflection and the cold, silent stars. She had won the debate. She had revealed the truth, and in doing so she may have just signed her species' death warrant. The conclave would reconvene tomorrow, but the topic would no longer be a nebula. It would be the soul of humanity. The next cycle in the conclave chamber felt fundamentally different. The air, though still a carefully balanced mix of gases, was thick with unspoken thoughts. The delegates took their seats, but there was no pretense of diplomatic pleasantries. The obsidian floor seemed to swallow the light, and the silence was an active, listening thing. Evelyn Reed felt the weight of every gaze upon her. She was no longer a representative. She was a specimen under a microscope. Zyler was the first to break the silence. He rose to his full, intimidating height, his voice a low, controlled thunder that promised violence. "We have deliberated. The Cathar Imperium has reconsidered its position on the human species." He stared directly at Evelyn, his golden eyes burning with a cold fire. "Yesterday we saw you as tool users, as soft-bodied rivals who compensated for their physical inadequacies with technology. We were wrong. Your technology is not your primary weapon. Your minds are. You have told us that you are not slaves to the hunger, not bound by the sacred laws of instinct. You have told us you kill by choice." He took a step forward, his claws extending from his fingertips with an audible snick. "We have concluded that this makes you abominations, creatures who desecrate the purity of the hunt with motive and reason. A Cathar kills because it must. It is clean. It is honest. You kill because you decide to. There is no honor in such an act. It is the ultimate expression of profanity. You are a blight upon the natural order." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and venomous. Evelyn stood her ground, her face a mask of calm she did not feel. Before she could respond, Nexus Prime 7 spoke, its synthesized voice devoid of Xyler's passion but carrying an even more profound chill. The Vex Hive has completed its primary analysis. The human claim of choice introduces an intolerable level of strategic uncertainty. Alliances with your species are statistically invalid, as the core commitments can be arbitrarily negated. Treaties are meaningless, as they are not reinforced by biological imperative. Your species' capacity for irrational, anti-survival action makes you a rogue variable in the galactic ecosystem. The insectoid's head tilted. The logical conclusion is containment. The human species must be restricted to its system of origin until such time as the choice variable can be understood and neutralized. We propose a joint resolution of the Apex Conclave to enforce a quarantine of the Sol system. Quarantine. It was a death sentence, a slow strangulation of a species just beginning to reach for the stars. Evelyn's blood ran cold. This was it, the moment she had feared. She had gambled on honesty and lost. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend her people, but it was Elder Thewum's voice that rolled through the chamber, forestalling the impending condemnation. "You are both reacting from the core of your natures," the ancient Glorn stated, his words a calming balm on the inflamed atmosphere. "Highclaw Xyler, you see a profanity against the sacredness of instinct. Nexus Prime 7, you see a variable that corrupts your perfect equation. You are both correct from your perspective." He turned his immense head slowly, his gaze falling upon Evelyn. "But you have only considered one side of this revelation," Xyler snarled. "What other side is there? They kill without need. It is the definition of monstrosity." "Is it?" Thewum's question was genuine. "Or is it merely the definition of freedom? You speak of the act of killing, but you have not considered the act of not killing. Ambassador Reed, tell us, if your people can choose violence, can they also choose peace?" Evelyn seized the lifeline he had thrown her. "Yes, Elder. It is the other side of the same coin. It is the only thing that makes our existence bearable." She turned to face Xyler directly. "Highclaw, when your hunger is sated, you are at peace. When your territory is secure, you are at peace. Your peace is a state of being, a temporary satisfaction of instinct. When the hunger returns, when a rival encroaches, the peace is broken, and the hunt begins anew. It is a cycle you cannot escape." She then faced Nexus Prime 7. "When the Hive perceives no threats and all resources are optimized, you are in a state of equilibrium. Your peace is the successful solution to an equation. When a new variable appears, a new threat or opportunity, the equation becomes unbalanced and you act to solve it. Your peace is a state of logical stasis." Her gaze swept the chamber. "Our peace is not like that. It is not the absence of hunger. It is not the absence of threats. Our peace is a choice. It is a willed act of creation. We can be starving and choose to negotiate instead of attack. We can be surrounded by rivals and choose to build alliances instead of fortresses. Our peace is an effort, a constant, conscious decision made by billions of minds every single day. It is the hardest thing we have ever done." Xyler hesitated. The concept was still alien, but the way she framed it, it spoke of strength, of will. A Cathar could respect will. "A peace not born of satiation but of conviction," he murmured, the idea taking root in his mind like a strange seed. "Precisely," Evelyn said, "and I ask you which peace is stronger. The peace that exists only until the next hunger pang, the peace that lasts only until the next logical problem, or the peace that is chosen, actively and deliberately, even in the face of hunger and threat." Nexus Prime 7's mandibles clicked. The Vex translator spoke after a moment of processing. "A willed state of non-aggression, a peace chosen is more stable than a peace imposed by circumstance. The logic is sound. However, the capacity for the inverse choice remains. A willed state of aggression is equally possible." "Yes," Evelyn admitted. "It always is. That is the price of our freedom. We walk a knife's edge every moment of our existence. But we believe the choice for peace is worth the risk of the choice for war. We believe that a true alliance cannot be based on shared instinct, because instincts can diverge. A true alliance must be based on a shared choice. A promise made not because biology compels it, but because we, in our freedom, will it to be so." The chamber fell into a different kind of silence. It was no longer the silence of shock, but of deep, uncomfortable contemplation. Evelyn had taken their greatest fear about her species, their unpredictable capacity for violence, and reframed it as the very thing that made their promise of peace meaningful. An instinct-bound creature must be peaceful when its needs are met. A human chooses to be peaceful even when its needs are not. Thewum spoke into the quiet, his voice a low rumble of finality. For millennia, we have understood the universe as a contest of compulsions. The Cathar's compulsion to hunt, the Vex's compulsion to calculate, my own people's compulsion to wait and endure. We judged species by the strength and nobility of their instincts. The humans have shown us a different way. They propose we judge them not by the instincts they lack, but by the choices they make. He looked from Xyler to Nexus Prime. To quarantine them is to punish them for their potential, for the bad choices they might make. To engage with them is to trust in their capacity to make good ones. It is a greater risk than we have ever taken. But perhaps, his great eyes seemed to gaze into the distant future, it also offers a greater reward, a partnership not of convenience but of shared conviction. Xyler stood conflicted. His warrior's heart screamed that these choice-driven creatures were untrustworthy aberrations. But his leader's mind was forced to acknowledge the power in Reed's words. A chosen ally was a willed ally. An ally who stood with you not because it was in their nature, but because they had decided to. There was a strange, potent honor in that. He slowly, deliberately retracted his claws. The gesture was not one of surrender, but of consideration. Nexus Prime 7 remained silent for a full minute, its internal processors running trillions of simulations with this new, terrifying data point. Finally, it spoke. The proposal for quarantine is tabled. The variable of willed alliance requires further analysis. The potential for a stable, chosen peace presents a novel solution to long-term resource conflict. The risk of a willed betrayal remains unquantified. We will observe. The crisis was averted, but nothing was resolved. The motion to quarantine had failed, but the fear and suspicion remained, now transformed into a wary, unnerving curiosity. The conclave adjourned, the dispute over the Cygnus Veil resolved with a temporary compromise that no one truly cared about. Its significance had been dwarfed by the new, galactic-scale problem of human consciousness. In the days that followed, the nature of the conclave changed. Delegates from other predatory species sought out Evelyn, not with open aggression, but with a barrage of unsettling questions. A raptor like avian from the Scythian hierarchy asked if it was true that humans sometimes kept prey animals as companions, an idea so perverse it made his crest feathers wilt. A serpentine delegate of the slithering court wanted to understand the concept of forgiveness, of choosing not to exact retribution for a transgression. Each answer Evelyn gave only deepened the chasm between humanity and the rest. They learned of human saints and human serial killers, of their capacity for breathtaking altruism and bottomless depravity. They learned that the same species that had composed symphonies had also designed gas chambers. They were confronted with a species that contained every contradiction, a species whose nature was to have no fixed nature at all. Xyler requested a private audience with her before the Cathar delegation departed. They met in a neutral observation deck, the swirling colors of a nearby nebula painting their faces. "Ambassador," he began, his tone grudging but respectful, "I still believe your freedom is a curse, a sickness of the soul." "On our worst days, Highclaw, we are inclined to agree with you," Evelyn replied quietly. "But," he struggled with the words, "this conviction you speak of, to choose a path and walk it, my instinct drives me and I call it honor. You have no drive, yet you create your own. I do not understand it, but I can see its strength." He shook his massive head. "We will not be your allies. Not yet, the risk is too great, but we will not be your enemies either. We will watch you. We will see what songs you choose to sing." He turned and left, a proud, powerful creature utterly bewildered by a universe that had suddenly become far more complicated. Evelyn's last meeting was with Thewum. He did not ask her any more questions. He simply floated in his alcove, observing her. "They are all afraid of you now," the elder rumbled. "Before, they saw you as weak and they felt contempt. Now they see you as free and they feel terror. It is not an improvement. It is the truth, Evelyn said, and we have to live with it. Indeed, Thuum agreed. In our oldest legends there are tales of the first predators, beings who were not born of the silent flow but who created the currents themselves. They could shape reality with their will. They were spoken of as gods, and as monsters we never believed they could be real. He blinked his slow, galactic eye. It seems our legends were too modest. They only spoke of one such species. As her transport ship pulled away from the apex conclave, Evelyn Reed watched the station shrink until it was just another star in the infinite field. The revelation was out. Humanity's secret, their burden and their glory, was now known to the galaxy. They were no longer seen as just another predator struggling for survival. They were something else. They were the species that could say no to their own biology. The species for whom every act of violence and every act of mercy was a deliberate, terrifying, and sacred choice. The galaxy would never look at them the same way again. They were feared. They were incomprehensible. They were alone in their freedom. And as she looked out at the endless, silent darkness, Evelyn felt the crushing weight of that freedom settle upon all of humanity. They had introduced the galaxy to the calculus of choice. Now they had to prove to themselves and to the horrified onlookers among the stars that they were worthy of solving it.